Hello, and welcome to the Full of Ship podcast. Real answers to real problems. With your host, Kyle Henderson, CEO and co-founder of Vision API, a podcast dedicated to demystify the chaotic, often turbulent world of ocean freight. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of Full of Ship. I'm your host, Kyle Henderson, and today our very special guest is Krenar Komoni, the CEO of Tive. I apologize, Krenar. Did I get the pronunciation of your name
You
correct?
got it
Oh,
perfectly.
wonderful.
Perfect.
I'm always the worst at pronouncing people's names. So I'm glad this was an exceptional moment and I got it right this time. But
You definitely did. You did.
well, thank you for joining. We very much appreciate your willingness to give us your time. And for the listeners who may not be familiar with Tive, maybe you could give a brief introduction to yourself and maybe the Tive story.
Yeah, definitely. I'll try and keep it brief. It's been 6.5 years now almost since I started the company. It's crazy how time flies. But yeah, my name's Krenar. As you mentioned, I started the company back in 2015. My background's in tech, so I have nothing to do with supply chain logistics when I started the company. I used to design chips for smartphones like 2G, 3G, 4G little radios, and then worked with a startup, an MIT startup, where I was the first employee. We built the world's most efficient base stations, those things that go on cell towers. So a lot of wireless experience, and I stumbled into supply chain logistics, quote unquote, through marriage because my wife's dad has a trucking business, and he was in Worcester, Massachusetts. He still is in Worcester, Massachusetts. I see him, even I'm going to see him this weekend. But I would go to his house, and he would be on the phone trying to figure out where his truck drivers were all the time. And I'm like, you know what? Let me figure out a way to make a GPS tracker using my experience that I had in electrical engineering and a little bit of code that I knew. So I built a little PHP MySQL database, pretty unsecure
This is
app.
before the days of Raspberry Pis and stuff, right? This is
I think they were just starting, but there was nothing with cellular. There was no like Particle IO or any of those companies with cellular. So I built a GPS tracker, put it in the trucks, started tracking his trucks, his friends' trucks, and realized some of the shippers were putting these temperature monitors on top of pallets. And this truck driver, Tony, he would always move stuff from Maine and lobster and seafood, things like that. And one time he brought one of these devices to me, and I asked him, how do you guys take data out of this thing? It looks very passive to me. And he said at the end, somebody takes a look at it, plugs into a printer, and then they get like a strip chart of temperature readings to see what happened with the shipment. I'm like, that's a little bit late. It's all after the fact. And that's where I embarked into journey. I'm like, I got to figure out how to take that device that I put in my father-in-law's trucks and his friend's trucks and his friend's trucks and see how I can make it into something that's battery operated in real time and lasts for a long time. I mean, one thing that I realized out of all of this, I would say making trackers sounds easy, but it's very hard. But the second thing, you always have to take into account the user experience, because it's not just the product, it's not just technology, it's the whole package, and how logistics folks and supply chain, like primarily logistics managers and warehouse folks are using the tracker. How do you make it really easy for them? And that's something that I really focused on as we built this. So that's why I believe we've been really successful to date.
wonderful. And what's the array of devices and the kind of services that Tive has brought to market now?
Yeah, it's now beyond, it's much more than devices. So what we've done since 6.5 years, we were just starting with devices quick, briefly, is we were the first in the industry to release a 5G ready tracker, this one right here. What's interesting about this, it gives you very accurate location. So you know which dock you're in, you know where you're at the port, where you're in, which side of the border you're in. It's amazing. Customers love it. And also tells you conditions such as temperature, humidity, shock, if something got dropped, the orientation of a shipment. There's a light sensor to tell if somebody opened the shipment. All of that in a very cost-effective package, and customers love it. And then we were the first in the industry to release another one which has no lithium batteries, which is amazing for the environment. You don't have to place like a big sticker that says dangerous goods on a shipment every time you put a tracker in it, and customers also love that. Does you can fill up an airplane with non-lithium trackers and nobody's gonna say anything, which is amazing. And then on the software side, what we've noticed is the service that we provide there. Customers can set up all their workflows. They can set up the alerts that they care about for their shipments, and they just connect with APIs into transportation management systems. And now they can manage their shipments. They can, if there's an issue, they'll get alerted, and all of that is available in our software, and customers love it. And the third thing that I'm really excited about is our monitoring team. So we have more than a dozen customers now who work with us every day, and they give us their workflows, they give us their standard operating procedures, and we're like the ADT of supply chain logistics. We'll monitor customers' shipments. They don't have to they don't have to worry about anything, which is awesome. So these are the primary services that we're doing.
And so to make sure I got that, so devices initially, and then you were able to move on to the software, and then it's the services. Curious, you said you've been at this for 6 years now. What were kind of like the inflection moments? When did you move beyond devices to the software? When did you move to the software to the additional services, and maybe why? Why
Good,
expand that way?
good question. So, well, logically, right? I believe in basics. Maybe we talked about this a little bit offline, right? Basics. What I mean by basics is if you don't have a good tracker, reliable tracker that's cost effective and works and customer love, you can't build anything else on top of it. So let's start with the basics. So I started working on the device. You just have to. That's where the data source is. That's where the data starts. And I believe in controlling destiny, and I want to be in control of that destiny when it comes to Tive. I want Tive to have that full stack, but be in the control of the destiny. Look what's happening with chip shortage. We had to redesign the device. That's number one. Now I understand exactly how data looks like and what kind of data I can get, accuracy, reliability from the tracker around the globe. Next thing, obviously the software was just a map with some dots. Nobody was going to pay for that. So as software evolved, what I noticed, and I had an advisor who helped me out, and he said, you know what, why don't you start charging for software? So we started the company in 2015. First time we started sending bills for software or signed the first software contract was in end of January, like 21st, 22nd, something like that, of 2020.
Wow.
Right? So 5 years we charge no software. So that inflection point happened because the software evolved. Like we have integrations now into API with TMS. We had alerts. Like it just looked better when we charged for this thing. So we started charging for software.
It became more actionable in some way. I'm guessing what you're saying. Like instead of the dots on the map, and people are like, okay, that looks great. What do I do? Like, what were you guys' insights in creating the software to make it so your customers had something they could do with the software in some way? Like, curious, like what really started taking off for you guys in terms of the software use case?
Yeah. Couple of things. One was when we started integrating, talking about ocean data, we started integrating vessel data into our platform. So it was beyond just a dot on the map from our tracker. We could actually link the vessel information coming from the vessel AIS data and connect it to the tracker from port until it arrived at another port. So customers like, wow, the software is actually doing this. It's not just the tracker.
Yeah.
So we had a package for ocean visibility going from standard to enterprise, like charge customers a little more. So when you start seeing that separation of various features, that was one. Second, this might sound silly, but having a temperature alert is pretty easy to do on software. Like, oh, if it's above 32 Fahrenheit, send an alert. But when customers started asking, well, we need something that's above 34 Fahrenheit after 4 hours, that's when we got the alert. Once
Gotcha.
our software evolved a little, became smarter, and we could actually create workflows like that. Well, I don't want to start an alert immediately because the tracker might be hot by the time I put it in the freezer. That goes from like 70 degrees down to 32. silly things like that, that software wasn't ready. But once it became ready, now we were more like as a team, right, much more confident to say, hey, software does all these things.
Very cool.
Those are some quick small insights.
Yeah, and I'll take off my product manager hat that I've worn for years at different software companies and ask the services. So you mentioned like the services is the third part of the business, and what was the impetus? Like what was the genesis of the services? What drove you guys to create that offering?
Good question. It's customers again. It's just always
There's a need.
customers
Clearly,
first.
there's a need,
There's
right?
exactly. But we started with one of the largest strawberry shippers in the world, and they're like, Krenar, just so you know, we don't monitor these shipments ourselves. Can you do it for us? I'm like, well, I don't have a team right now, but let me figure it out. So we built a team very, very quickly. I was even monitoring them at times in the beginning. Now we have a full team. They do an amazing job, and they come from logistics background. But and they gave me workflows and standard operating procedures, exactly what needs to get done when something happens with a truck, when something happens with a refrigerator. Who do we call after X times? When we call somebody, we have to call them. We have to call the carrier. We have to call them. We have to wake them up and then if they don't wake up, send this email. All those workflows are pretty amazing, but it helps them a lot because they don't have to hire 10, 6 people 24/7 to
Right.
monitor hundreds and hundreds of loads a week that they do, and shipments throughout US and Mexico, all over the world. And I'm like, okay, if this works with this customer and they can sleep really well at night because they can rely on us to monitor, and we've saved shipments almost every week for them. We still do every week for
Curious.
customers.
What are you commonly saving the shipments from? What is like the problem that happens the most that is a thorn in the customer's side, but your services have really like relieved that pain? Like, what ends up being the sales pitch around the services for like the value?
Yeah, it's again, I keep going back to this example. There's so many more, but for instance, berries, like if you
Mhm.
put them if you put them at 40 plus degrees Fahrenheit for 8 hours or 50 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 hours, they're gone. Like
Toast.
it's
Yeah.
toast, and they're gonna get rejected. So what we see all the time is like a reefer going to 40 plus degrees for a few hours. We call the truck driver, they go out, they fix the setting. Next thing you know, it maybe they turned off the reefer, right? But every time we call 2, 3, 4 hours later, it goes down to temperature. But we've saved shipments because sometimes the reefer's broken
Yeah.
and truck driver did not know,
Yeah.
and we were able to move them to a facility where they fix it, like Thermo King or Carrier, I forget one of them. They went to a service and they were able to fix the reefer, and that shipment made it safely to Costco and on time, and the shipment didn't get spoiled. These are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff.
And
The other one, maybe not directly actionable in a sense, but there was a customer they're still our customer shipping meat out of Australia into Qatar, UAE, Korea. They were getting 25% of their loads rejected with meat.
25%.
25%. They were spending millions, 6 million, $7 million a year just on rejections from customers, but they had no data to prove otherwise. They would just say, okay, sorry, we'll pay. So when they started putting the trackers in the shipments, now they had like, listen, here's the shipment, we put the tracker in, it was like frozen meat, it arrived there completely frozen and in good temperature. You opened it, here's when you opened it, here's the PDF file, can't debate it. Like, we're not accepting your rejections, and it stopped, and they saved $6 million that year.
Wow.
Um,
And I'm guessing like it dropped from 25% to like, I'm assuming like 1% or
correct.
something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's highly impactful. That's
correct.
that's a margin maker versus a negative margin sometimes
Yeah,
for that beef business or that meat business. That's pretty amazing. And
we had
so,
another one recently where, I mean, again, it was just a carrier told them that they were at the yard, but they were not really at the yard, and they were charging them like for
But a
just
carrier would never do that.
waiting. I don't know. I mean, listen, there are amazing carriers. There are
Yeah.
amazing carriers that service our customers, and my father-in-law is a carrier, so I love them, right? They just love all the carriers. But sometimes, as in any business, right?
Yeah.
Some people do things a certain way, and they said they were at the yard and they were just waiting and they were not letting them in, and we showed them with data that that was not the case,
Yeah.
and they were able to not pay that. It was like quite a bit, few tens of thousands of dollars.
And I've been hearing about this thing called the Open Visibility Network. And if I'm understanding, Tive was a major driver behind it, correct?
Correct.
And it's kind of a collection of visibility providers, from what I understand. Could you tell us
And
more
auto
about
service.
this Open Visibility Network? Could you tell us a bit more about, how it got started? How has it grown? Who are the parties involved in it? Are carriers part of it, or is it just visibility providers? Just fill us in on the story behind the Open Visibility Network.
Yeah. I started noticing customers wanting us to so it's not a lot, right? But few customers and wanting us to, hey, can you integrate into this TMS? Can you integrate into that TMS? Can we push some of your data potentially to one of the visibility providers that I'm using, whether it's MacroPoint or Project 44 or FourKites or anyone like that. So I said, you know what? Yes, we're gonna start working. I have a really good relationship with Jet at Project 44 and also Matt at FourKites, and I'm like, this is what's happening in the industry. Can we partner? So we said, okay, why don't we partner with Project 44, and then we'll announce a partnership with FourKites and just doing out partnerships. But it didn't seem like, I said to my head, partnerships just doesn't make sense, because we do a partner, it's one to one. The industry wants
Yeah.
something that's one to many and many to one. So that's where I don't forget where I was. I think I was flying to Florida or somewhere for work, and just in the airplane thought about the Open Visibility Network. I'm like, that's what the world wants. That's what customers really, really want. They want a place where they can go and understand who the visibility providers are. They want to understand who works with one another really well to be able to provide the services that we need to provide. So I said, let's start the Open Visibility Network, and Project 44 and FourKites were the first ones that joined. And then after that, we brought in Transvoyant and Marine Traffic, Everstream, Cloudleaf. Now they're called Parkour, Weather Optics, and there's a few more that are joining. But the idea is time. The simplest. It's so easy to sell because it's the time to value.
Yeah.
How do you shorten time to value? The Codis Logistics, they wanted data into their TMS. The TMS was going to take us 3 to 4 months to integrate, plus $50,000-$60,000.
Mm-hmm.
P44 was already integrated with that TMS. Like, why don't you just go to a P44, put a carrier Tive, put the tracker number, and you can see that data into TMS. 1 week later, boom, they got the data into their TMS. That's the whole point of Open Visibility Network, to be able to open that. Same with a shipper, a retailer, who they're doing all outbound shipments with FourKites. Now, inbound shipments, they were using passive loggers, but that data was not going anywhere. They had no idea what was going on with temperature. They had no idea where inbound trucks were from their suppliers, primarily on fresh produce. So once you put a tracker in there connected to FourKites, just a few customers here, then they were able to see inbound shipments.
This sounds like a game changer because, similar to you, I'm not originally from the logistics space, but from the relationships I've built and been able to learn about the history of the space, speed to value, time to value, the true cost of integrations, getting better visibility and monitoring data into the software a company or an end customer is using. From the stories I've heard, has traditionally been a headache, a very, very long-lived headache. I'm talking not like weeks, months, quarters, sometimes years. what are you hearing from the end customers, like that story you just shared of, that time to value, get the data where you need it, meet the customer where they're at with the data they need and the engines they already have. What other stories you're hearing around the space around the kind of almost like new generation of technology, which makes connecting these systems so much faster and easier? How have the customers in this space been able to understand the value of having all these pipes kind of set up between all the players already?
Um, I would say what am I hearing? What am I seeing and hearing? I guess both is there's an evolution that's happening, and primarily the like let's call the API evolution from
Never heard of
EDI to
those.
API. And hence your company name, right? Vision API. So Vision API. So that's it's it's happening, and because of that, there's companies like Chain.io and a few other ones that are trying to democratize integrations for everybody from TMS to uh, any service that you have. That I mean, it's just time.
Yeah.
There's no going back. It's inevitable that this is gonna get easier and easier to connect. I know it's been a headache for sure.
Yeah, because in the past, this is EDI data, right? It's trying to pass off not human readable files, dropping them on SFTP servers, and there's no like real time communication between systems or anything like that. And what that might sound a little like technical jargon to some listeners, but what that really means is you don't have your answers in the software you use the moment you could have the answers in the software you use. There's like a delay. You're waiting. You may not actually get the information. It's siloed in some way, shape, or form. When did the Open Visibility Network kick off? When did it start? And how long? How has the growth of it been?
Good question. I can tell you exactly the date.
Whenever that
It
flight to
was
Florida was, right?
yeah, the flight was like January, and then I just P44 was the first one who joined. It was February 2021. Wait,
Awesome.
wow, it's
Yeah, a
fast, huh?
year. Yeah,
A year.
yeah. You're not counting its age in months anymore. It's now a year.
It's now a year.
And how many
Would
kind of
love would love
partners?
Vision API to join. That would be awesome.
Oh well, thank you for the invitation. We will promptly show up at the party. And
Awesome, let's do
curious,
it.
how many companies are at the party now? How connected is the network?
Right now, there's 8, and there are 3 more that will happen in the next 30 to 45 days. And it's
Wonderful.
open. Everybody can join. It's not, that's the whole point of being open. It's not closed to anybody. We want to keep it open. Hopefully, we're thinking of even organizing events around it. I think that'd be quite fun if we can do an event on Open Visibility Network one day.
And are there any
And the,
focuses around it? You say it's open, but is it like North America focused in some way? Is it global today? Is it trucking oriented? Is it
think
are
of
those
think of it
limitations
this
just
way.
based on the parties who've shown up so far, or
No, it's more this way, right? It's not the way criteria works is pretty tech company.
Mhm.
Like if you're not a tech company, you just doesn't. That's the point of the Open Visibility Network today because you're providing some kind of technology to the industry. Two, you have APIs. If there's no APIs and cannot get data from you, and you're not open about your API documentation, if you become a customer, you're not part of OVN because how else can you be open if you don't have APIs? And then third, you are around the visibility space, right? So whether it's weather data that you're providing with visibility, whether it's risk associated data, whether it's inventory management associates around visibility, anything that enriches visibility, um, it can be part of it. But if it has to be tech, it has to be with APIs. If it doesn't have those two, like it's customers need to get some data. So
Speaking of customers getting data, I'm a little curious about when did customers start asking for data? And the reason I phrase it that way is I remember being in this space back in about 2015 when Tive was starting, and it seemed like visibility data could have a should have. But it seems like things have changed a bit. From your perspective, can you tell the story of why has visibility data become as desired and sought after, and the need grown um, over the last handful of years? What have been the drivers behind the desire for visibility data by cargo owners, supply chain stakeholders?
Um, I believe it starts with the consumer. That's where the birth is, right? From the consumer side with Amazon. I mean, that's the story
Yeah,
we've heard, and it's true, right? It's just
yeah. The
we all
consumer is
got
the
used
real
to
wallet,
Amazon.
right? They pay for everything.
Consumer is the real wallet. The consumer is the one who's really experiencing what's happening with the world, and seeing that, hey, if Amazon, if I can order pizza and know exactly where the pizza is, if I can order a burger, if I can order something from Amazon, know when it's gonna get here. These are the same people that are working in this industry, right? And they go back to work like, why can't we do this for our
Yeah.
shipments? Like, what's the point? So then they said, well, these trucks already have GPS. Why don't we pull ELD and telematics data? So that's Project 44. Four Guys came up with the idea, and just customers love it. And the concept is, if if you want to evolve your supply, but before I get there, like once you see that data, you're like, now it's there. I want
Yeah.
it.
Can't go
Like it
back.
just can't go back. It's like a Pandora's box, right? It's
Yeah.
once you open Pandora's box, you can't go back. Like you just expect it now. Like
Yeah.
it's I need to know where my shipments are.
So
So
to
and
make
then with COVID happening, obviously that accelerated. Everybody started talking about supply chain. Everybody started talking about logistics. This, how do we make it better? How do we make it better? Well, to make it better, we need the basic. The basics is where is the shipment at any given time. Because if you don't know where your shipment is at any given time, there's nothing you can do. So that basic need, now it's evolving, of course, like like various facets. But without that basic data, there's nothing you can do on top of that, right? Like inventory management, order management, rerouting,
Mhm.
knowing where like shipments are, understanding that, hey, I ran out of um, bottles of some kind of soda or anything at store A, and it's Thanksgiving, but store B has plenty, and I was delivering to store B, just deliver to store A in real time. Customers want to get to that level, but to get to that level, we're still in early stages of data gathering. So it it became one of those things where if it's there, we need it, we want it.
So to make sure I understood, the consumer and let's say the competition to win the consumer led to making bigger and bolder promises: 2-day delivery, 1-day delivery, 15-minute delivery. And to be able to do that, let's say like at the last mile parcel level, more visibility was required, right? Like we've had better visibility like on USPS, UPS, FedEx packages for quite a while. But let's say you're like the Amazon and you're trying to make that promise a reality. Did the pressure from winning the consumer create a need for visibility for the parcel? And then did pressure for visibility on the parcel create pressure on visibility for the truckload? And has truckload created pressure on visibility for the containers? Like, are you seeing it go upstream? Is that kind of happening with the story as we flow back up the links in the logistics and supply chain networks? Is that what's happening in the space you're saying?
Yeah, and then the one level up is what happened with Flow and White House, right?
Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
announced the
Just
other
earlier
day,
this week, right?
just earlier this week, let's go and open everything, ports and everything, so I understand exactly what's happening with all the shipments. But the other element, which is psychological more and just nature of competition, if I'm a 3PL, now I'm offering visibility, quote unquote, for free, let's say, or for a small fee to a customer. What are other 3PLs gonna do? They're gonna stay or they're gonna try and compete. So they are gonna try and compete, and visibility just becomes part of the package. This is how I look at it the other way. You look at $8 to $10 trillion of freight spend that happens a year,
Yeah.
and think of it as stacks of stuff like fuel and truck and vessel and airplane and aircraft and services. Visibility is going to be a slice of that freight spend, um, for every single shipment in the globe.
Yeah.
And that freight spend, of course, has just been going up and up. So visibility is minuscule. However, it's just
It's a
going to
big
be
pie
part of
though.
that. It's a
Big pie.
huge pie, huge pie, huge
Yeah.
pie. As I said, in trillions. But what I'm saying in that stack, it's going to be always there now. It's like
Yeah.
part of the budget. It's like fuel. You need to move something A to B, you need to pay for gas. You need to move something from A to B, you need to pay for visibility.
Yeah. Well, that's a good prompt because is it fair to say the classic visibility question is, where is my stuff? What's the next question visibility is going to tackle or deliver value on? How do we go beyond where is my stuff?
Yeah,
What
where
else
we're
must be
focused
visible?
on,
Yeah.
where we're focused on is how do I make sure that everything makes it to that final destination on time and in full? Everything.
Yeah.
So what's the goal? Its goal is let's quote unquote save every shipment. Like that, we can save it if we know that something is about to go wrong. So that's the next. Save every shipment, get everything on time. Check. Like we're not gonna get 100%, of course, but like we're gonna do our best. So it's not 80% or 90%, but it's 99.99. It's something
Yeah.
huge.
So it's kind of the shift from
The next,
it's kind of a shifting
go
from
ahead.
the where to the why. Like performance is the next step in visibility.
Could-
Really being able to understand when you aggregate all the where is my stuff, you all of a sudden okay, are all my promises true? Am I arriving on time? And if I'm not,
Mhm,
why am I not arriving on
mhm.
time? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because it's immediate. It's the low-hanging fruit. It's immediate. We can take action today. And now, once you understand performance, you understand how efficient your system is. The next step after that, I think it's inventory control and demand planning. Obviously, there's going to be black swan events like COVID, which completely throw a wrench. But when
Yeah.
they throw a wrench, you know exactly where everything is. You
Yeah.
know exactly what's happening with your shipments. You know exactly where the demand is
Because
and the
the only
planning
thing I
is.
can predict with absolute certainty is there will be more wrenches. I don't know
That's a
when
good
and
one.
where, but there will be more wrenches. And so, what I'm hearing is visibility gives kind of like that agility and therefore resilience to be able to, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. Not to, not to pick a quote from a classic
Yeah,
comedy film, but to be that more resilient supply chain, visibility is going to be the key, is what I hear. Is that what you're saying?
100%. Imagine the alternative.
Like,
It's night.
what
It's a
can you
night. It's a
improve that you
nightmare,
can't
right?
measure? Yeah,
It's a nightmare.
yeah. Not to too sound engineering, but like, how many problems survive their thorough definition, and measurement by itself is the definition, right? Like, if you know why something is breaking, you know how to fix it. It was just
Correct.
when you're in the fog of logistics and you don't know why things are happening, how could you possibly be able to approach the problem or create a better system or network? But
Yeah.
to
Fog
that
without a
point,
compass. It's just
yeah,
you're lost.
to that note, um, so there are benefits for shippers being able to be more proactive. It sounds like, and what are what are some of the other kind of use cases or values or actions you hear companies taking with, like, when they have more quality real time accessible visibility information? I hear, where is it, how can we do better with performance? What are the things after that companies are going to do with visibility? What's on more of the horizon? Because it sounds like some companies already are really getting at that why. They're thinking about their network designs and making them more efficient with visibility data. But what happens after that? Any thoughts on that? And granted, I might be asking you a question of like what's happening 10 years from now, but maybe get some insights.
Man, 10 years from now. I think, well, demand planning, as I said, it's gonna be, think of your ship, your container your truck, your trailer, same as the inventory inside your warehouse. I think that if we get to a point where you can not even distinguish inventory anymore, you look at your globe as a company and you look at inventory, you look at everything as small warehouses and inventory that's fully connected, and to be able to plan it in real time, that's, I think, like nirvana state, because
So
that's just, it's, yeah.
not to coin another not to coin another acronym, but it sounds like you're saying inventory as a service.
Interesting.
If it's all
Yeah,
connected, it's all monitorable, it's all reconfigurable on the fly, right? It all of a sudden becomes a software problem versus a hardware problem.
correct. Think of Uber, right? What it did to taxis. Now let's do it to the inventory. It's got to
So
take time to get there, but because you got to connect so many things. And I always say this, right? What's the most globally interconnected system in the world is the internet and the financial system. I can wire bitcoins, ethereums,
yeah.
dollars anywhere in the globe. I have 10, you have 10, I give you 2, you have 12, I have 8. Clean. Simple, data's like, it's transparent. Supply chain logistics is the next most globally interconnected system in the world. And if imagine if you had data like that.
So let's wrap up the chat. Any final
Okay.
comments that you'd like to share with the audience? Any predictions? Any any thoughts that would get some heads getting scratched or might change some perspectives? What are people not thinking about in this space that they should be thinking about?
Ooh, I mean, I mean, technology. I wake up every day. There's exciting stuff happening every week, every month. Like, we're gonna move forward. Things are gonna get better every day. Inflation, I would say, is something that people should be really thinking about, and just the yeah, the overall system
And is
at
that from
which
the
we live.
perspective of how much the supply chain logistics network directly influences inflation?
And
Because it
vice
is
versa,
supply, or
and vice
vice versa.
versa. Yeah, how much the actual dollar and printing of the dollar and inflation influences supply, commodities, fuel.
Yeah.
Look what's happening with fuel, right? It just, these are, I'm just worried that that's the next black swan, and I hope it's not.
How not to throw one more question. How inefficient do you think supply chain is today globally?
Oof,
How would you even measure
I
that?
don't.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an MIT study just on trucks and trailers? They looked at all the DAT data and a bunch of other data, like 40% inefficiency today. Like,
Yeah, and if we back a
and
napkin that, yeah, and said, let's just say globally apply then, what is it? How many trillions is put into the logistics network on a yearly basis? What is it? I think I've heard it's like 10% of the planetary domestic product is spent on moving the product.
yeah.
So if it's 40% inefficient, that would probably have some impact on inflation if we improve that number.
And the way inefficiency means, the way it was defined is if you had all the data and you could tell all the truck drivers where they could go next,
Yeah.
like reducing empty miles, it's like
Yep.
40%.
Wow.
It's we'll get there. The
One day.
globe. I coined another phrase. Well, I don't know if it's a coin or imagine the globe as a startup. I wish we can do that one day, right?
Yeah.
We have to grow and go through a startup. You have to go through so many things and systems and connections and everything that needs to be done internally
Yeah.
in a startup. But if the globe was a startup and everybody acted that way and we took care of it as a startup, I think we can make something beautiful.
Well, that's a good closing note. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time. All our listeners appreciate your thoughts you shared. So thank you for being a guest on Full of Ship, and I look forward to the next time we're able to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Thank you. This is another episode of Full of Ship. Thank you, Krenar Komoni, Tive CEO. This is Kyle Henderson signing off.
Thank you for joining Kyle and his guest on the Full of Ship podcast. Be sure to subscribe and tune in next time as Kyle continues to demystify ocean carrier tracking with his future guests.